Hello, everyone. So I'm Kish Hirani, and the rest of the panel is walking through. While they do that, I'll tell you our plan for this evening, or this afternoon at least. That's it? Okay. It is a discussion panel, so we are not going to be having that traditional way I tell them to start talking and then tell them to stop talking on a topic or so, but we will guide it in some certain ways or so. But more importantly, the last 10 minutes, we've decided we're going to have one of you send in a discussion item, so that 10 minutes will be whatever you guys want this panel to discuss. The best way, they're going to introduce themselves. I'm going to introduce myself first. But best way to describe these guys is, remember if you're in a pub or in a cab and the cab driver goes, I've got this game idea. Would you like to make a game on that? And then that discussion goes nowhere because you hear that all the time. So these guys actually get paid for that sort of discussion. They go into the office and they say, I've got a game idea, and they get a salary out of it. So I'm Kish Hirani, as I mentioned. I'm self-employed right now. I'm doing a lot of consultancy work. I worked for PlayStation as head of developer services, technical services, everything technology involved for European developers or so came through my team for about 8 years. Before that was Microsoft. Before that was BBC Multimedia, Acclaim in video games development, but always been technical development or so. So games design, I think I'm going to be fairly neutral in the sense that I won't be able to push too much of it because I've got no qualification in creativity of games design. We're going to start with a couple of questions which I'm going to plan through, but I'm going to, as the mics are going to be passed on, just naturally introduce yourselves. Otherwise, I'll spend 10 minutes introducing you and wasting time. So David first, sorry.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is David Thue. I'm an assistant professor of computer science at Reykjavik University. I teach a course there on computer game design and development. It's a 3-week course where the students start with nothing and end up with a game. At the end, we host an open house where everyone can come and try it out. We've been running this for about 3 years now. We've seen something like 30 to 40 new games being made. I also conduct research in the field of artificial intelligence to basically decide what should happen next in an experience. Experience management is the idea. If you can learn something about your audience, you have the potential to make their experience better. And I particularly apply this work in the context of games.
Nice. So I'm Sarah. I'm based in Germany, and I'm an indie game developer. I'm developing Lucid Trips, which is also on the second floor here, so you can try it out. And I'm also a VR shaman. I'm guiding people who do long-time experiences, so from 24 to 48 hours. And yeah, so I do different stuff with the community, indie games, indie hackathons, like game jams, all that stuff.
Hi, my name is Mick Strouberg, and I run a market expansion platform and agency out of New York called Lemon Squeeze. In the last 3 years, we've assisted more than 50 companies enter and expand in new regions. And we're helping everything from gamers to SaaS companies and to digital setups, but also into physical companies. I actually don't know why I'm here right now on stage, because I'm probably the only one not knowing anything about UX or the setup. What I know something about is how to pre-hype a game and how to make sure that you actually use the creativity and the design before the game is developed, and how you market it. So the commercial aspects of getting to market is probably why I'm here.
Hi, my name is David Reichel. I'm the creator and developer of Color Switch. And I don't have a long history in the game industry. I started studying game design about 3 years ago. And I'm also not a programmer. I use very simple, I think you call it open framework or closed framework software to build my games. And I went from that to scaling up from the success of this game to, now I am the designer for all sorts of games we're making in the background, but I hire programmers for that now, so I'm more of the creative director. But I have a pretty varied background before that, but I don't want to take up too much time with that, but that's me.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm VP of Game Design at King. I've been making games for 20 years, last week actually, which is really cool. Started off at Bullfrog, and I've been head of game design for THQ, Disney Pixar, Namco Bandai, and now I'm at King. So that's me.
So, right, let's get started. But with Mick also, I told him we wanted somebody who's a gamer on the panel as well. So everybody else is a gamer, but that's another qualification you have up there, including the audience. I hope everybody's a gamer as well there. So we're all good. Right, I'm going to get started. I'm going to give you a very sort of very short experience which I had, which I thought was fantastic to plant in terms of how technology, hardware, software, whatever comes along also inhibits your game design. So being at Sony, I had the privilege of being involved with PlayStation 4 development, including PlayStation Vita as well, not PS3 because I joined year one of PS3. But so Mark Cerny was basically wanting to visit lots of European developers, and I had the privilege to actually accompany him around visiting lots of developers. So we went to Quantic Dreams, and earlier stages, we talked to a lot of technology tech directors, CTOs, equivalent. So those are very straightforward. It's very logical conversations which go on. You put polygons and bandwidth, et cetera, we put it together, and you know what the hardware should be, what the software will be. But it got more interesting in the last year before launch of PlayStation 4. And so we sat down with David Cage. And so one of the things Mark Cerny asked David, and I was sitting there as well, is we're at a stage where hardware is fixed now. What would you like in software, which right now on PlayStation 3, which is stopping you from your creativity? You're creating amazing game, Quantic Dream, Heavy Rain is very well known as a very, very different in terms of gameplay, interaction, story. What would you like to see in PlayStation 4, which is stopping you right now, not hardware-wise, but software-wise? And he said, I know what I wouldn't like, and the problem is I create this amazing story, gameplay, and you guys mess it up by bringing up small, ping, you've won a trophy. I've suddenly created this lighting, world, sound, everything, and you completely take over. I can't override that, and the system takes over. I don't want that. And so what David did, if you've, and hopefully most of you guys have played Heavy Rain or so, if you notice, the whole episode, you play the full game, and then the next episode, when it starts, episode 2 or 3 or next chapter, you earn the trophy of the previous chapter. So he didn't want that illusion to be broken, but he actually would ideally want none of that at all in his is telling a story, and you as a gamer, you're playing a game. Yes, you're going to earn a trophy, but why would you want something to be telling you that as a gamer? You just know that, and you can check that afterwards. Anyway, so now planting that, I would say, please take it the way you want in terms of a discussion, whether you want to future consoles or devices or any playing platforms which will be coming along or so, or what is right now which really annoys you, or what inhibits you from making your ideal games design or whatever vision you have for your game.
But I think what you said right there is what designers love to do, right? So we love to have challenges and then try and figure out these like creative solutions about it. And I remember that in Heavy Rain, and I thought it was like really ingenious to do something like that. And I think for us at King, we're doing a lot of mobile games, right? And so what's important for us, like Jacob was saying earlier, was like retention, and how do we get players to be into that game straight away? But on a mobile, you could be playing it anywhere. You could be playing on a subway, you could be playing on one hand, you could be playing portrait, landscape. And so it's constantly trying to figure out, by using those technology and using those ways to try and figure out how to capture the player straight away. So I think we actually quite like problems.
Because it's actually even worse, because what happens is then you troll this trophy, do you want to post it on Facebook? And next thing you're on Facebook, and then 2 hours later, you're just like, I can't be asked to play the game anymore because you were on Facebook.
But yeah, that's true, actually. I think that's the biggest thing for us, mentioning that we're trying to figure out at the moment. That we do the same kind of thing. We set up this story vibe and stuff, and as soon as you connect to Facebook, it pulls you straight out the experience, and it has to put you back in. So that's something we're trying to figure out.
So has anybody else figured it out or have ideas of how? what you have done. Sarah?
What? No, I just thought like what really annoys me on developing the experiences I want to develop is at the moment motion sickness. So in VR you still get the thing that like your vestibular senses are getting confused with like moving too fast or flying like super wild. So I'm really looking forward to anyway like headphones or any other solution that keeps you off motion sickness, because it's just a thing like I want to let the player completely free, like the player should come back because he's not having to fulfill any task or having to do work there, because I really don't like games where I'm actually in the position to work, because I want to play for fun and for getting relaxed and being calm and just exploring things. So that's also why I do VR games, because I just like this open world, just let myself go and be totally lost in another reality. And so I would do a lot more crazy stuff if there wasn't like this big point like motion sickness. So that's what I'm
going to point you to David next on this or so, but one of the key things which we've looked at, and none of the devices right now are going to be tackling that, is the muscle fatigue you get because of, and that's why when you're playing VR or so, yes, the obvious latencies, etc., has been solved, so you don't get headaches because of that or so, but you get tired because your eye is constantly trying to focus on a 2D screen which is put in front of you pretending to be 3D, whereas if it was detached, it was very easy. Your brain eventually would figure out, and the natural sort of transition you have, and after about an hour or so you get tired after watching. But with VR, because it's too close, your eye is constantly focusing because it's being forced to see 3D, but you can't focus on anything specific on there. And I can't remember the name of that muscle or something, but I think future hardware, everything will be fixing that. But is anything where you see game design-wise that could be changed to, apart from making shorter games?
That's a good question. So you're trying to limit fatigue?
Yeah.
The player's experience. I mean, this is out of my field entirely. I like artificial intelligence because it doesn't deal with physiology so much directly.
Yeah.
Okay, if I have to theorize about this, I mean, there is some new optics technology that's already hitting the market in some limited fashion from Lockheed Martin. This is the Wearality Sky. Basically, it's a light bending. They've been researching refraction, and this is tech that they deployed to the US military. But now they've branched off and they're trying to see if we can basically solve some of these focus problems. You still can't choose exactly where you focus in the world. That's still going to be a problem. With eye tracking, we might get some of that back. If you can know where the person is looking and you know the depth because of mathematics of the object in the scene, then you could bring it into focus properly, as basically our eyes do automatically for us as we're scanning a scene. That might be the best way to go forward with this, is to actually get eye tracking inside a headset, and I'm hoping that we'll see that in the next generation.
So anybody else can share what they're working on right now where they've tackled that? Because I think some of the games just say, just forget peripheral vision, don't make too much things happening around, because then your eye just focuses in the center. Well, I'm hoping if anybody can give a live example or maybe make something up for...
I just wanted to add to the conversation about obstacles and problems.
Do that, yeah.
I think you have to look at them as a very positive thing. I liked what you said about problems, and oftentimes a problem can be your best friend because it forces you to find a creative solution. And just to go back to, I use software to build this game called BuildBox, and when I first started learning it, I didn't know what I could make with it because it seemed like everyone who was using it made all the games that it could make. And I had to really get creative with a solution. And the games I wanted to make, I couldn't make with it, and it forced me to find something that I could make with it that no one had made before, and that ended up being the best solution to my problem. So I think if you're always striving to improve your thinking and learn, there's always going to be a problem to solve. So it's kind of a never-ending battle. But having these endless problems to solve will always improve how you think and what you do, and they're really your best friend. So I think problem solving is just a constant thing you'll never stop doing if you're always learning.
Right. But I also think it adds to innovation as well, because it's the limitations that give you, and that's how you start to find the creativity. Yep. I used to work on a lot of licensed products like Harry Potter and stuff, and you've got the limitations there of the brand, and that makes you try and approach game design in a certain way. And one of the things we do at King at the moment, we try and impose limitations on the designers and then allow them to innovate throughout those things. Mm-hmm. So if I said to you, for example, design to me innovative kettle, right? You could go anywhere, but if I said to you, design innovate a kettle with an innovative power supply, that focuses you. And then you start to think, okay, everything else is sorted, but how do I make this truly special? So I think technology and its limitations just allows us to be more creative.
Yeah, I guess that was also the thing that happened to me with the flying thing, because I really wanted to fly, and we're still flying in Lucid Trips, but we came up with a lot of solutions to minimize motion sickness a lot. So we have a comfort level, which gives you a more fixed points in the view, like localized particles, and then we have a vignette which is closing down. We have a low gravity situation. Like in the beginning, we were going all crazy, like running around, jumping off, flying around, and now it's more like float and fly. You're really calm. You go slow. Don't go up and down very much, and all that stuff. We came up with it, like we started in 2014 very early with the DK1 and the Racer Hydra. But since all that way, like we came up with so many solutions which we would never have done if it would have worked straight away. Yeah, totally.
But with everything else, like with limitations, it's amazing when you have limitations or if there's obstacles, if you can solve them. And what I'm also hearing is you keep on saying we, and there's all this stuff that's great, right? But if you're not competent, and if you can't solve it, then limitations is pretty bad. So there's also something about who you're actually creating that team with, because there's so many brilliant, competent guys out there, and girls, who can't really figure out how to get around the obstacles, and when they reach the right team, then suddenly everything can happen, right? So it's also about constellation. I think that's a super important part, because obstacles are super annoying. Like, there is nothing worse than not being able to fixate on anything else than the one obstacles. And again, being a part of a team, that's probably also why King is good. It's probably because of management, but also because of how the constellation is made and how you put people together to actually make sure that those obstacles get eliminated relatively fast.
Great. So that sounds like the feedback you'll send back is to platform holders, software, middleware, etc. Do what you want. We'll be fine. Put all the constraints. Right. Does anybody else want to add anything else where they find sort of... there needs to be somebody who's disagrees, saying there's something really annoying in current systems or anything. I mean, keyboard and mouse, I mean, they haven't changed in the last 40 years. Sorry, say that.
I find gamepad totally annoying.
Gamepad.
I mean, VR with gamepad, it's just super annoying. I hate it. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I got one thing to add to what you were saying on how, if you're not competent to solve the problem and you find a team to work with that you can, sometimes you can solve that by getting those extra brains involved. But I think one thing you can always do for yourself to help you solve current problems or future problems is, I think of the quote for one of the definitions for insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And so what's missing from that quote is, if you improve how you think, you'll gradually improve what you do, and you'll eventually solve that problem most of the time, or all the time at some point. And so a resource that I've always used to help me to, at least I strive to improve my thinking all the time, is a book called Thinker Toys, and it's a book of creative thinking techniques. And imagine a mechanic going to fix your car, and they have to unloosen a bolt that they can't do with their hand. They need the wrench. They're not going to go in there with their hand. They're going to get the right tool to do the job. So, we should all do the same thing when we go to brainstorm or find creative solutions. Don't go in there without a tool set. And Thinker Toys is a great tool set to help you think in ever-increasing, improved ways to solve your problem in all these creative ways that it's really infinite. And I've just been using these techniques for 5 years, and I use them to create, my ideas, all my game ideas. I used to use 2 techniques, and there's like 35. So I think if the idea of always improving, striving to improve how you think, never always assuming you don't have most of the answers, maybe you only no matter what kind of success you have, you only know like 0.001% of what there is to know and what you're studying. Means you'll always strive to find those answers and then always improve how you think. And then gradually you'll improve what you do until you reach that breakthrough or that goal that you're trying to get to.
No, that's a great book actually, and we use that a lot at King as well. And has this great exercise in there where you take a limitation and you try and turn it into an innovation, right? And it has this great one about restaurants. So if your restaurant, so my restaurant doesn't have food. So how do you turn that into something innovative? And it could be that, okay, that people bring their own groceries and then a top chef cooks it for you, right? Or our restaurant doesn't have a chef. Well, then we provide the food and like a Korean barbecue or something, you can cook it. So it's all about embracing that. That's why I find that a really difficult question to answer about limitations, because I think we love it so much, you know, to figure that out.
It does. No, that's great. That's, I was hoping you'll challenge us, say, let's change hardware and software world, but none of you did. I'm going to move on to the next question. And we've got sort of quite an assortment in terms of AAA, large studios down to one individual indie person to academia. One of the questions I phrased to them earlier on as well is, so if there was no budget constraint or reality-wise you do have a constraint, in terms of your games design, how do you train yourself, your team, in anything, whatever you're working on? I give an example. I think a lot of you might have read the article where Destiny team lead designer actually went to learn boxing so he could learn how to make first-person shooter camera movements more realistic without causing you sort of fatigue or so, because boxers take in punch and they move their head in a certain fashion or so. So he actually went that team had practically infinite budget in terms of training or so. I'd love to hear from you guys on how various levels what you guys do, which is non-conventional as such, to learn and make your game actually more better.
Yeah, so we've took a lot of our Candy team, like designers, coders, and artists, to actually learn how to make candy and actually like cook it and make it and then taste it. And because it's very important for us, like when you play that game, that it triggers like pleasure, right? Right. And so we want people to, the artists and the designers to actually understand that, you know, that when you bite something that you feel that crispiness of it, you know, and the strong flavors. So we do that kind of stuff quite a lot. And then we do a lot of, with game design in general, we do a lot of bonding exercises. So recently we took all the game, we have about 144 designers at King, like globally. And we all do different things at different studios, but I took the Stockholm ones to learn how to make cocktails. Because again, it's like, we find that anyone that's got true creativity, whether it's like architects or, you know, cocktail makers, and it's just really fascinating to see the process, to see how they can take all these ingredients and make something truly special. Mm-hmm. And having that respect for the creative process in general. So we try and find as many things as possible to see that this outside games. Yeah.
Well, I can speak from a position with no budget behind it. So we are making our own money, like doing side jobs to develop that game. As I said, like we're doing this for 2 years. But Lucid Trips, for example, it's inspired by lucid dreaming. So we all trained or learned to lucid dream, also all our team. I mean, it started with 2 people, but then also the other 2 people who joined, we really got them into that thing, because it's so important to really know what the feeling is about, what the game is about, how you move around. And also in lucid dreams, you can fly. Like people are tending to fly, to just jump off the ground and fly along. And yeah, of course, we're also doing our research, but just on our own budget. We try to do as much as we can, and we're super happy, for example, like getting invited to conferences and go there and just show our game and get feedback from the community. Like the community is helping us so much. I mean, the gaming community is also just the greatest community I met. I mean, I'm actually from a design background, like 3D design and that stuff. But it's just like there's so much exchange, it's so much learning together. Yeah, also like, yeah, I think the most important thing for us is the community that helps us further also without a budget. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things that, an exercise that I take my class through in these 3 weeks that they're making games is to ask kind of, basically they come up with an idea during the first week and they pitch it at the end of that first week. Kind of we shape this idea as they're working on it. Then in the second week, early on, we force them to think about particular questions about their game that are kind of the most important things for actually getting the effect on players that they want and the things that they know the least about. So they're trying to kind of rank all of these possible things that they need to learn about their games to find these ones that are super important and super unknown. Then they take the top 2 or 3 and we help them design like survey questions. And at the end of the second week, they have to have an alpha test ready for players to try that specifically answer these questions about their game. Then half of the class, half of each team becomes a tester, half of each team is an experimenter running a station. They all go through, play each other's games, fill out all the surveys, and then they switch. So they get this experience of being both a researcher trying to learn about their game, as well as a playtester on a whole bunch of other games at the same time. And this seems to be really valuable in terms of getting something out early and also informing the third week of development, because it's such a compressed time. You kind of have to get as much knowledge as you can early on in the process.
Before I get David to say, would you actually, if somebody's pitching a title or so, how much value would you put on them saying this is how we're training our designers on, and Candy Crush stuff? I mean, what price do you put onto that? How do you measure it that eating candy will make you make bad candy games? Does that make any difference if they happen to mention that?
It's kind of fun because I was actually almost about to challenge it, but then I thought it would be rude in a panel. It's because there's this clear difference between when something is a gimmick to empower people to wanting to do it more because whoever they're working with wants you to feel in a certain way and they want to show that they really respect you and want to get you into the game. They want you to feel it, which gives you a lot of power and also sparks creativity because you feel that you're a part of something else where people are actually thinking about you and your creative mindset. So if you put that aside and then putting it into the game, I don't know how much effect it has on the game, that they can taste the candy and stuff like this. I've only played it a few times, but the whole feature part about actually saying, we need to feel this game all the way to our bones is super important. If it works, I don't know, but it would be something that I would sell. It would also be something where when you hire the next person or when you hire the next guy and you tell a story like this, it would be something where they really respect me, King. They do everything they can to inspire creativity. They do everything to retain me, and there's just all these different features that they don't do otherwhere. So that's kind of like it.
But yeah, I think you hit on a few things there, right? So one of the things something like that does is definitely, it gives inspiration, right? Because when you'll come to work, and Swedish people are incredibly, probably like Icelandic as well, probably incredibly healthy, right? They have their candy days, which is on a Saturday, and they all eat like tons of candy, and then they work out for the rest of the week. And I think it just helps them go into something like that and seeing the process. Again, like I was saying, you get to see different type of creativity, which does inspire you. Helps you bond as a team. It helps you, the colors and stuff like that, right? When you see the candy when it comes out or when you're creating it yourself, the colors just really inspires you. So whether it adds to actual gameplay is debatable. But what it does, it makes you go back and feel really passionate about what you're doing. And I think a team needs to be incredibly passionate to create something special. When I used to work at Disney, one of the things they used to do every now and again was actually, because you're dealing with all the bullshit, right? You're dealing like, you're making your games, there's politics, there's all this kind of crap, right? And, but what they do is they make you go to the park. And you get to sometimes dress up as a character in the park, right? And then you start to see like, wow, I'm actually part of something that brings people a lot of joy. And then you actually go back and you feel good about what you're doing. So I think it's incredibly important on that.
But to answer your question, when we look at companies who want to expand in the same way as an investor would look at a company. So there is passion and dedication, which is one of them. There is team, which is another one. There is some kind of budget. Mm-hmm. And then there is how the entire onboarding back office works, just to make sure it's there. If we're talking to someone who does something like this, and you can feel that they want to do everything within their power to create something that's extremely unique and special, and next to them you have someone who does nothing but just bears on, you have to go to work, you have to sit in front of your screen, you just have to make stuff work. And you will always pick the one who actually takes care of their employees, but also tries to indulge and tries to spark some kind of creativity because they feel the passion themselves and they want to bring it out to everybody else. So of course, dedication, passion, and discipline is kind of like three major things.
And
to expand on the idea of inspiration, I really connected with a book called The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell, and he's a prolific Disney game designer. I think he still designs games to this day. And his book, I have like 20 books on game design. His is really unique in that he calls each perspective a lens. And he really bases it off of his experience. He goes into how he was a juggler, he was a magician's assistant, he had all these different backgrounds and jobs he tried. And so how that inspired him, I think, in his book is it showed him that he could draw from each one of these backgrounds, and it was a different perspective that he had that no one else had. And so he was able to draw from all these and put it into games, because as he says, games is very unique in that you can draw from anything, inspiration from anything, and put that into a game. And so I really connected with that idea because I, like him, have a varied background to where I was a combat medic, I worked as a close-up magician, I cleaned pools, parked cars, all sorts of things. And all these perspectives, I have used for inspiration from games. And I think the more you learn in life and try things out, and you don't have to join the military. I'm not trying to recruit anybody. I got blown up many times, so I don't recommend doing that. But if you seek out inspiration, and again, Think Your Toys is great for tearing an idea apart into many pieces, and then you're going to find something that inspires you that you didn't see that was inside of that. And then you can, the more things you study and kind of gain knowledge for, and which makes sense how you take them to experience making candy and all that, and now they have that perspective that they didn't have before, and you can draw inspiration from it. Maybe it's not always tangible, you're not always conscious of the inspiration, but it's there. And so the more, if you'll continually throughout your life, you're always learning something new and logging that inspiration in your tool belt, you're going to have countless ideas always flowing from your subconscious or your conscious mind. And so I think, just always being inspired and aspiring to be inspired by many things is very important for design.
Mm-hmm. I think another really good thing that we sometimes do, and I've done in other companies before, is you go to toy shops.
Yep.
Because games is a very crowded market, and toys are a very crowded market. And you go to I used to get designers to go out and pick a toy that kind of inspired them. And it's interesting if you see all card games and what's the one that leaps out to you, and then get that designer to then break that down into what these things are, and then try and design a game with the same pillars that they did to break it down. And you actually get it helps them think outside the box a little, but constrains them as well because of the pillars that were on this game. But that's a really interesting thing for game developers to do, is just to go to toy shops and just look and see how different toys stand out.
So I'm just going to add Acclaim. We used to take them once a month. It was a cinema day, and it's only stuff you go into cinema, and then you come and discuss that movie in a studio environment or so. And that worked because improved communication and stuff, and you started talking about something which is not just work in your face all the time or so. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I also think every studio should have a VR headset, because it's the theory that if you get brain shocked every now and then, you're getting more creative because you have to adapt to other situations, like when you're traveling a lot, when you go to other places, other surroundings, your brain has to adapt, you have to adapt, you have to find a way to work around it. And the same thing happens in VR, at least for me, I'm immersed pretty easily, and I travel to so many places in VR, even I thought I was already in Iceland, even if it was the first time, because of the Steam VR experience with the dog, where you throw sticks for him. I was like, oh my God, I've been here. And it's you travel to so many different places and situations where you are challenged to do something out of nothing. I think that really keeps you creative, just experience a lot of VR. So.
Because I think we have to remember that the consumers are they're not just playing games. They're watching movies, they're watching TV shows, they're interacting with toys, they're playing board games. And I think as much as you can break what you're doing and try and understand that as well, just helps you become a better designer for mass market.
I promised the audience to plant a discussion, as in not a question, but a discussion item for the next 10 minutes or so. If anybody ready to tell us something, what these amazing designing brains, creative brains can discuss for the next 10 minutes? Otherwise, I've got more things I can talk about. Anyone? Oh, there's the person in red shirt. I can't see.
I heard a great board game designer talk about his design like theory or something, and he was talking about that he started out making his dream board game, and now, a couple of years later, a couple of games later, he regrets that because he wanted to make again and use all his experience from the other games into making it. What do you think of? Should you always start with your dream, or should you like try to get more experience before making your like dream product?
To me, I think you need to finish something first, because there's nothing more that gives you more experience than taking an idea and taking it all the way to the end and going through all the road bumps along the way. So even though you might have a dream, I would recommend that you try and finish something first. And then when you learn from that, then go for the dream.
It's open discussion to all of you. But I think if I got the question, are you saying his dream was to pursue board games, or he wanted to do video games, but he started off with board games?
He's a professional board game designer now.
Okay, yeah.
He regrets
Regrets, yeah.
dream board game at first.
Okay.
First board game he made.
He would rather would have been in video games, is that what you're saying? Or
He would rather
okay.
make a couple of board games.
Ah, okay,
Then
got you.
make his dream board game.
Ah, okay, okay.
I was going to say, I think it's good to go through the process as many as you can. I went through it 40 times before I had a game that made any money. No one knows about my other 40 games. They're all off the App Store now. I think they're all in the Barnes & Noble App Store, and that's defunct now, and all my games went into the graveyard. But, I learned so much. I mean, my first game I outsourced, and that was a big nightmare, and it took 6 months to make a game that should have taken a week, now that I know what I know. But I learned so much from every failure and every obstacle, and I was able to apply what I learned to my next game, and which would fail, and then fail. And then I got used to failing, and I embraced it. I would celebrate when I failed. And failed 40 times over 2 years, and then I had a year before this game came out, and I didn't put out any games because I got so frustrated with the process. But I didn't quit. I just said, okay, I'm not going to actually put out a game. I'll just keep at it. But oftentimes, you're going to learn a lot. It's going to be frustrating, but there is a breakthrough as you go along the journey. You just got to make sure you don't quit, because someone can be smarter, more skilled than you, but if you're more stubborn, you're going to get to the breakthrough and they'll quit. So it's definitely important to go through the process as many times, and oftentimes that means doing a small project. Don't do the epic MMO, as your first game. Maybe do a little tap game or something, but small. I would just say try to do it within your means, so you can go through that process a lot.
So I'm going to jump in here as well, not as a moderator, but as hopefully design, from a technical background. I think technology is one key thing where I'm trying to relate this to board games, but let's put it in video games because it makes the same sense anyway. But if there's some technology not quite ready as such or so, you'd rather leave that idea till your third project or however many years when technology reaches that point, and things like procedurally generated worlds, etc., that I would love to make a game, say, in 3 years ago or so, would have been a bit silly in terms of processing power, etc. So maybe that sort of thing I think justifies, but otherwise, I think if somebody has an amazing idea, you should just go for that, because if you are having amazing ideas, I'm hoping you'll continue to have amazing ideas and make better things, bigger things, rather than having sort of 3 ideas and one is the best, but let's try the horrible one and hope for the best or something.
Yeah, I've seen designers before that always want to, they have this amazing idea but I'm not ready to share it yet, right? And like you say, I think you're always going to come up with more amazing ideas. What's important is to keep trying and failing.
Absolutely.
You know?
And if you are inclined, I think, to keep some idea in reserve as like, this is my amazing idea, you can plan your smaller projects to help you learn toward making that amazing idea successful, right? Like structure, okay, this is an amazing idea that involves some kind of, let's say we're going to make an MMO. Don't, but say we're going to make one. We need to learn about networking, okay? So let's make a small, like, 2-player over-the-network game, right? Just figure that out. You learn a lot of the pitfalls along the way. Let's have something with an authoritative server or authoritative client. Like, all of these different things you can learn by working on small projects while keeping this amazing idea somewhere in your mind, and you're developing it, you're refining the design based on the things that you learn. And then at some point, you'll get to the point where you say, like, hey, I actually understand a lot about all these different pieces. Now I can try to go after this big thing.
If I can drag a parallel to that, just in the entrepreneurial world, if you have a great idea, if you have something that you really want to pursue, then you have to go for it, because you can't start 4 other companies and 4 other industries or do something else and then suddenly just skip over. But what you can do, and what we see in the entrepreneurial world, if it's Uber or if it's Airbnb or whatever it is, it starts with something smaller and more tangible that they can make sure actually goes live within a certain amount of time and also within their means, which is super important. And then they can build on it. They don't forget their dream. Like with Uber, it's about making sure that that less cars and all that stuff, right? Don't forget the dream, but before you can get to that dream, there's just certain steps. They're also thinking about electric cars even when they started, right? So there is, instead of doing something else, instead of building on it, then there's small iterative loops to make sure you get to that point of your dream. You just need to know that it's not going to be tomorrow. It's probably going to be in a few years. And instead of starting in the wrong direction, you can start in the right direction and then build it up. And I think, like, if you're building a board game, let's just say it's the first version of Trivial Pursuit, but you can't figure out all the questions, then you should probably do something like Trivial Pursuit, but just with 10 questions instead of 10,000, and then build on it, and then keep it working. Like, I think that's the way to go. But you can't do 10 other stuff that works in other directions. Unless it's games, and you need to know the infrastructure of how to actually build a game. Then you can't build a big game at once.
Go ahead,
I was just going to say, if you look at other industries, look at some big names like basketball, Michael Jordan, or movies, Steven Spielberg. None of them started off with their big hit like Jaws or Jordan winning. What's the award in the NBA? I don't watch sports. No, not a sports crowd. But,
especially American sports.
Michael Jordan got kicked off his high school basketball team, if you didn't know that. But, you know, all these guys had to work. They had to go through the trenches, you know, before they got up to what their dream was. So I think it's the same with games. You know, you're going to have to put in the hours and in the months or years to get the skill down, get the design sense to produce something like that. You know, it takes a lot of work. But it's that daily effort, those little steps every day that's going to get you there. And I always remember Michael Jordan, he said he failed over and over, and that's the only reason he succeeded. So you got to fail over and over and over to get to that success.
That was a great discussion, session you set up. You're probably ending towards the right. I've got this thing which I was told, it's sort of one of those discussion items which everybody loves, retention. I don't know why it's said 3 times, because it should be infinite, right? Can you talk about games design, creativity, etc., what you put in your games, or you hope to put in your games, etc., which draws players? Design is a very complex sort of topic. When I was given this to moderate, it's like we could talk about anything and everything, starting from how do you design a game, because everybody wants to know how you design a game, and it's like it's always, I had an idea, and that's how it was. But yeah, let's talk about what do you do in your games, or what you want to talk about retention. How do you get your player to keep coming back to your game?
Well, I would say back to the dream. As our game feels like you're kind of dreaming, or you experience a dream or something. Like a lot of people just take off the headset and say like, oh my God, I feel like I come back from a dream. So I think that's something like just a feeling they have, like this satisfying feeling they have in the game, and make them feel like comfortable and well and happy. So I think that's something at the moment which I do a lot. Yeah.
I think we do a lot of free to play, right?
Yeah.
So retention's like huge to us. But
business model.
But when I was doing console, we always used to call it as the third level, the third level. And that was because like people have already paid money for the game, right? And so they're going to play the first level. And if it was shit, they're going to play the second one. And then if it was good, they're definitely going to play the third one. But if it was still a shit second level, then they might try the third level just one more time because they paid that money for it, right? So it was the third level that would like bank it. But like in free to play, we look at play sessions, right? So there has to be something there that within the first play session, which might be between a minute to 15 minutes, that has to pull you, that's going to want to pull you back, whether you're emotionally invested in the game. So you have to hit the right kind of pleasure points within the game design, right? And our candy games do it where right from the beginning you trigger these big moments and these wow feelings which pull you back in, and you feel really good. It looks difficult, but you do it and you feel good that you've completed something. And then we look at other stuff. I'm working on this game at the moment, and we're trying to figure out that when you actually finish the first play session, what's going to pull you back. So we got this hero that right from the beginning you're told that there's this hero, and this hero is away on a mission. And then just as you finish your first play session, he's going to come back. And so it's just things like that that's just continuing the experience that you have to try and think about constantly to make the retention worthwhile.
David, I'll get this David first. So two Davids on the panel. Maybe some science or backgrounds in terms of games design of retention. Is there something you can play around with people's vulnerability, brain, AI, etc.? How do you get, apart from giving them addictive drugs or something?
Okay, so it's super interesting to try to model what's going on inside a player's head, however you might get to that. Like it could be through some kind of brainwave sensing that we're using, or even just telemetry in the game, like just from the patterns of player behavior, you might be able to infer certain things about them, be it their preferences or potentially their emotional state at this point in time. I think we're still a fair ways off from learning that properly. But basically, you kind of have to think as a designer, and in my case, as an AI system that is actually there online while the game is running, what is the trajectory that you want the player to have kind of within a session, and how do you actually hit that properly, right? So my research is about trying to understand how to build these dynamic systems within games that can adjust the content over time to follow this trajectory that some designer has prescribed in advance. There are many ways to try to do this, right? One that I've seen applied in games recently is the notion of when you first start the play session, it gives you a recap of what has been happening in the story so far. Like the Witcher games do this extremely well, where they, just as the game is loading behind the scenes, it's saying, oh, this is the point of the story, this has been happening, and then you start up the game again. Now I'm finding the games that don't do this, I'm not able to get back into if I step away from them for too long because I've lost all of the context. And so those games have lost me because they lack this. So it's one example of a way that kind of you can try to improve retention even in these long-form games that people have paid for, but you want to keep them enjoying it anyway.
And I think I'll emphasize a bit more on that because it's ever evolving, because in the days of when there was just Pong, you just had one game, so you didn't really care because they'll come back and play that again. Now you've got your mobile phones, you've got your consoles, you've got your PCs, you've got your lots of VR-wise. AR is going to be coming along also, so suddenly more distraction, more people being dragged away from your game, so you have to try harder to make even better retention sort of games or algorithms, etc. So David, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say, for my game, I focused on 4 or 5 specific game design elements. One was the flow state, which is, basically keeping people engaged because they constantly feel a little more challenged in, little increments. So it's not too challenging, not to the point to where they're bored. It has to be in the sweet spot. So for the main game, I really worked on that, the idea of surprise and a couple others. And then what that did was people liked the main game so much that to keep user retention going, we started coming out with mini games and new characters to unlock. And we've done this for the last, how many months is it now? Since December. I don't do math. We have not seen revenue go down at all. It's been, we shot up and we just stayed, in the top charts for a long time. And, we do updates every week. We give people new, we strive for good content with all these game modes and characters and whatnot. Dang it, I had another good point. I lost it, totally lost it. But, I think, we have a really simple game. Usually people play this game for a week, maybe less, and they're done with it. But we found a way to keep giving people content, and so I think if you that's one way for user retention, by keep giving people new ways to play your game, or new types of games within your game based on the theme. And I had another point, but I forgot it, so that's all I got.
You can always finish your summary with that point when it comes back. So.
Yeah, but we do that a lot. We do a lot of live events, and it's continually pulling you into the game. And that's a big thing, retaining for us. But I think a lot of designers get confused between depth and complexity, and they over-complex their design and their game, and that leads to a game that's not going to retain. But the trick, like with things like live events and the stuff that David's doing as well, it brings depth to the game, but on a very simple game that pulls you in. And I know there's this funny story that the CCO, Sebastian, told me about Candy Crush, right? And when it first came out, it didn't have life systems when we were first doing initial playtests. And he added life because he was scared that people would be playing it too much, right? And he was getting really concerned about people are going to burn out and people are just going to not enjoy it after a while. So he started putting lives in, but that ended up as a big retaining thing for us because people ran out of lives but still wanted to play the game.
Yep. I remembered my other point.
Great.
So one of the main exercises I've done that I learned from the art of game design is to, when I study a lens in that book, and let's say the lens of surprise, what you do is you download games and you analyze the game from that lens. So I download a game, is this game surprising? If so, how does it use surprise? Does it use it in the menu? Does it use it in the actual gameplay? What elements of the gameplay and the characters? You ask all these questions and download another game, do the same thing. Download 100 games, 1,000 games, analyzing each of those games through the lens of surprise. Now do the same thing with user retention. Do your research, find out what are the top 10 games as far as user retention. Download those games, start asking, try to think of 20 different questions you can ask about that game after having played it and analyzed it in regards to user retention. And that's a big key to game design, and user retention is part of game design. Game design is every aspect of a game. And so by analyzing thousands and thousands of games, which is what I focused on for the last 3 years, you gain a deeper sense for these things, and by seeing what works and analyzing what works, you're going to start finding these things you're looking for, or the answers you're looking for your own games, and having user retention on a
So I like scale. King does it very well, but lots of other games do it very, very well, where updates, basically if you're fixing some bugs, etc., add in some content which people feel they've actually worked there while updating their software, etc., and that retains because it's something new coming along or so. Because a lot of games are patched all the time, and I think the worst thing ever is you patch a game and nothing is different, and it just says minor fix or whatever update where it was. But adding more gameplay, something else, more levels, etc., I think that's a fantastic.
But yeah, the Valve guy said it earlier today about update, right? Yeah. Because I think as a consumer, you want to feel like the company is invested in your experience. Absolutely. As well, right? That they care about what you're doing, and so it's very important to constantly update your game, to constantly offer you new experiences, But I think one thing I will add, though, is no game is the same. There is no golden rule for retention. You have to do what's right for your game, and you have to like you were saying, look at a lot of games and figure out why did it work for that game and not work for another game. And it normally works because of the vibe of the game, you know, and it feels right in that game. If you just copy another game and think, oh, they've got lives or they're doing this, then it's highly likely your game will fail.
Would you like to add anything else from a commercial point? No?
No, in the commercial point, it's still the same because everything when it comes to games comes down to the design and how people are reacting to it. All you can do with games is you can make sure that there's enough users on. Candy Crush is a great example, like putting in lives when there is a lot of people using it and when they're already active is amazing because you can start to do different kinds of features that you wouldn't be able to do if you had 0 users. So again, there is so much about, the retention is only, you can only do retention if there's actually anything to retain. So building it up, making sure it's up there, and then retaining it is a big factor. And I think for the designers, making sure it gets to that point first, helping the commercial team, helping it get to a stage where you actually want to retain something or you have something to retain is just super important. And King is a larger commercial setup, right? So you have guys doing all of the marketing and having the entire setup, but actually having engaging, again, taking to a candy store and anything else, having the designers also know that 10 million users is just so much more fun because there's so many people watching your product and actually seeing it, trying it, using it, instead of you being, I don't know, sometimes some of the designers we work with is kind of snobbish when they're like, because their product, if people don't like it, they shouldn't download it. It's kind of like, stop, dude. Let's see if we can get some pre-hype up and running. Let's see if we can actually make them download it because it's going to be so much more fun for you and for the rest of the team.
I just remembered something Stanley Kubrick, the film director, said. He said he'd love to go see movies he didn't like because then he would think of how he would improve them. So another good exercise for analyzing games is analyze games that really bombed or you hate or you know, a lot of people don't like. And oftentimes what you can do is you can find a solution for the problem of that game. Why is this not working in this game? And you'll start, it's a good exercise for finding those solutions. And if the game isn't good with user retention, you know, you can analyze why, and oftentimes you'll find these holes and how to fill them and how to improve that game. So that, you know, analyzing games that are bad according to your opinion and your sensibilities is a really good exercise as well.
Yeah, at King we have every single designer has a budget where they can buy 1 game a month, and that could be from Steam or console or whatever, right? And they also have a budget for spending, you know, within mobile games as well. But we encourage them to buy games that they don't want to play, because it's like really interesting, like you were saying, to actually see, you know, why is that game successful? You know, because it can really inspire you as a designer.
So we've got sort of 4 minutes remaining or so. I'm going to, because I think most of you are sort of in a position where somebody's pitched a game to you. So what's the most surreal ever idea which been brought? I'll start first at Sony, and this is surreal because it goes into sci-fi realms. So I had another privilege of going to Israel, and the university was doing research for the Israeli army, but they started off by saying, the world has become very peaceful, so the army doesn't need our technology, but we're looking at how to induce sleep where you learn things. So you actually make a video game and then you put that person into that sleep cycle using certain brain waves or so, then he learns that level more complex, so he's actually then being able to play a more complex game. And we would like Sony to fund that research, and it's not happened yet. But I'll start from one, and this is the last time you'll get to talk. So what's the strangest thing you've ever come across? You've probably got about 30 seconds.
Okay, so I work with a lot of students who pitch like thousands of game ideas in the course of a week. So I'm trying to think of what the most surreal one could have been. The thing that came to mind is a game about old people and who have Alzheimer's, and you as the player are trying to help these people rebuild their memories by putting together songs that they remember from their youth. And so you're listening to little clips of sound, and they're like there, and they become happier if you kind of get the right piece of music to the right person, and you're sort of assembling their memories through music for these old people.
Okay.
Well, I'm working a lot with the Berlin creative VR scene, and there's this guy, Victor. He's also...
We're not naming names.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, but yeah, he's very proud of it. He's playing around a lot with penises, like he's doing penis games. It's called something penetration, and now he wants to do that in VR, like having a dildo as a controller, all that stuff. So that was like super crazy weird shit.
I don't think I have one game that was pitched to me that was super surreal, but I think when I open my app store and I look at all the games, sometimes I wonder who's playing some of those games. And I think that there are so many surreal games out there, but it's so cool because they all hit some kind of niche. Like someone's like, I was at the gallery just before I flew over here where I saw pictures made out of pubes, and it's kind of like there is something for everybody, right? And everybody is going to find their niche, but like just open the app store and there will be something in there.
I've had a lot of developers send me games. I haven't had a weird one. It's more what the most common thing that happens is that they'll from evidence from what they send me, they've only been designing games for maybe a couple weeks or a couple months, and they want me to they usually are asking for my opinion. Should I send this to a publisher? Is it ready? I got this golden idea. Wait till I send it to you, and then it's just really bad in a lot of ways. And so I always say, once you if you're trying to get a publishing deal and you send that game to a publisher and you're not ready to send games to publishers because you don't have your game design skills polished yet, they won't forget you in a bad way. And so what you want to do is you want to design a bunch of games first, get those skills down, put in the work before you actually send it out to companies because, again, they're not going to... They're going to be like, oh, this is the guy that sent us that game that I didn't even understand how to play. Like, I've had that happen where I didn't even know how to play the game. But, so I always say just work on your skills, first for a while before you, think about sending a game to a publisher to get some kind of deal.
Right.
The ones, I probably hear this a few times a year, but it's always, what if there is a game that is a first-person shooter but on a farm where you're farming, and then maybe you do a sports game as well, and then if you want the vegetables, then you can do a switcher game to do the vegetables. No one's ever done that. No one's ever merged all the games together to make the ultimate game. And I hear that at least twice a year.
So right, we're out of time. We're going to end on that. Thank you very much, audience, as well as the panel. Cheers.